tonight. Her son died from a cocaine overdose. Now, this Saskatoon mom is angry about how insurance companies dealt with his coverage. Another species of mosquito known to carry West Nile is showing up on the prairies. And after an injury sidelines Trevor Harris, the Riders are putting their faith in backup QB Mason Fine.
This is CBC Saskatchewan News.
It is Monday, July 17th, and the CBC Saskatchewan News starts right now. Sam is away tonight. Thanks for watching. A Saskatoon mother says it's just not fair. Val Jansen's 37-year-old son Josh died in 2018. It's what happened with his insurance policies, though, that makes the Saskatoon mom angry. Dan Zakreski brings us the story.
This is the way he was. He was a happy guy, just full of life and had that twinkle in his eye.
Josh Jansen loved the outdoors, his family, and his partner Maggie.
They were a beautiful couple.
Val Jansen says her son also had a drug addiction that was blowing up everything he'd built.
Oftentimes he was psychotic, and we had to be really careful because we were afraid he might harm himself or, someone else. And then it got to the point where he did lose his job at the mine.
Josh Jansen died in 2018. The autopsy showed that he had fatal levels of cocaine and booze in his system when he died. Now, Jansen had mortgage and line of credit insurance, and when he got that insurance, he disclosed that he had a cocaine addiction. But after he died, the companies refused to pay off the more than $200,000 in debts that he'd insured because he died while committing a criminal offense.
He didn't do anything wrong in terms of, he was up to date on everything. And he even came forth with, on his insurance sheet, he told them that he was using cocaine. And they still continued to take his premiums and did not adjust the clause at all.
Jansen took the companies to court. She lost at King's Bench. And then earlier this month, the province's highest court also sided with the insurance companies.
I think it's just another example of how we continue to criminalize substance use disorders in our country and around the world.
Kayla DeMong says the insurance companies saw Josh Jansen as a good guy when he paid his premiums, and then a bad guy when he died. She says it's discouraging that the courts endorsed this view.
We've really stigmatized a population when substance use disorder affects people in all walks of life, people in all careers, all income levels. And, when it comes down to it, we're again placing a moralistic judgment on a group of people that really just need help and support, and it really should be treated as a health issue.
We reached out to the insurance companies that declined to make the payouts. They declined to comment.
The law has to change because it's a health issue.
Dan Zakreski, CBC News, Saskatoon.
Pine Grove Correctional Centre in Prince Albert is significantly overcrowded, and a Saskatchewan nonprofit says it will only get worse if the province does not provide housing to support incarcerated women. CBC's Laura Sharpaletti has that story.
This isn't the first time organizations are sounding the alarm about overcrowding at Pine Grove Correctional Centre. But the Elizabeth Fry Society of Saskatchewan, a nonprofit incarcerated women's advocacy group, says the alarm must continue to ring as overcrowding has created unsafe conditions for inmates.
People then have the potential to become violent when they're crowded in that way. We did have a report from one woman on Friday. She gave our receptionist a call and informed her that also their food rations were being cut, and also even their laundry was being reduced.
The province tells CBC that Pine Grove currently has 263 inmates. Its capacity is 166. Of those 263, 156 are on remand. Obrigovich says there is urgent need for housing for women seeking bail or being released.
if people were released on bail to housing that had a supportive component to it, which had addictions programming, mental health supports, stability, safety, and all of those things, you could help people so that they don't actually have to go back into institutions.
Obrigovich says the lack of housing can place women in desperate situations. Some commit poverty-related crimes, struggle to get away from abusers, end up homeless, and lose their children. Obrigovich says the government needs to get serious about finding a solution.
Saskatchewan maybe just needs to talk to some other governments in other cities and see what they're doing there, because we're heading to a crisis.
The province says when Pine Grove is maxed out, corrections uses contingency spaces to increase capacity. And as for doing more for women's housing, the province recently provided $3.6 million to the Saskatoon Tribal Council for a housing unit in Saskatoon built to help women transition back into the community after leaving jail. Laura Sharpaletti, CBC News, Regina.
Indigenous leaders in Manitoba have agreed to move a blockade set up at a Winnipeg landfill site. They want the provincial government to fund the search of another landfill for the remains of 2 murdered women. Chiefs, experts, and the families of the victims held a news conference today to respond to the decision by Manitoba Premier Heather Stephenson not to pay for the search.
They are not garbage. Yet they are being treated like garbage left in a landfill site. No proper burial, no closure for the family.
A feasibility study says it could take as long as 3 months and cost as much as $184 million to search the Prairie Green landfill outside Winnipeg. Police believe the remains of 39-year-old Morgan Harris and 26-year-old Mercedes Myron are there. Organizers of the blockade say they'll move to a site at the Museum for Human Rights when police arrive to enforce an injunction. Well, if you've been avoiding Louvain Drive in Regina because of construction, you'll be happy to hear upgrades are now finished. The last of the traffic barriers were removed yesterday. The city says the road renewal project was finished 5 weeks ahead of schedule. The asphalt was redone, lines repainted, and the concrete medians replaced. The city says the project cost $2.4 million and will increase the lifespan of the busy road. Well, it was a double dose of bad news for the Saskatchewan Roughriders this weekend.
Harris is going to take off, pushing his way ahead, and he's got a first down. Trevor Harris goes down awkwardly, though, and he's grabbing his right knee.
To pile on to the loss at home to the Calgary Stampeders, the Roughriders will be without the services of quarterback Trevor Harris for an extended amount of time. Early in the fourth quarter, Harris was scrambling when he had his right leg rolled up on. Backup Mason Fine played the rest of the game. 3 Down Nation's Justin Dunk says the Riders have a lot of trust in the young pivot.
The Riders' case here, Mason Fine has some starting experience. They really thought he was a guy that could help get them in the playoffs at the end of last season when they benched Cody Fajardo. So they've been high on him for a while, and you never really know what you have in a quarterback until you get an extended look at them. So I don't necessarily think the Riders' season is over. As Crum showed with the Red Blacks, there could be some intriguing potential there with him, and I think there is the same thing there with Fine. So fans need to relax a little bit and see what Fine can do for the Riders.
And Fine will have his hands full the next 2 weeks with road games against the BC Lions and then touchdown Atlantic in Halifax against the Toronto Argonauts. Well, there is an unwelcome buzz in the air this summer on the prairies. A species of mosquito known to carry West Nile virus is showing up further north than expected, and it's surviving and thriving despite the harsh winters. Terry Reith finds out why this pesky pest has scientists concerned.
On a summer day, it's great to play until the mosquitoes come out.
They're just the worst. They're like everywhere, especially in like the grass and stuff. I'm like walking through fields, just biting me all over, and it gets so itchy.
I hate them. If there's a mass extinction on the planet, I would beg it to be mosquitoes. They're a nightmare.
Now one more reason to loathe the creatures, a so-called urban mosquito named Culex pipiens, one that carries the West Nile virus.
What we're seeing here is Culex pipiens in every level of development.
They breed quickly, they thrive in cities, and all it takes is a bit of standing water, a catch basin, bird bath, even a puddle to create multiple generations.
I will say we have been surprised at the scope of how well Culex pipiens is thriving in our city and in this new environment. So we are gearing up to, we're trying to get the message out because it really is something new.
The breed first arrived in southern Ontario in 2001, and the first West Nile virus cases in humans were seen a year later.
These are the invasive mosquitoes we've been talking about.
Experts say it's now proven it can survive a prairie winter.
It's able to colonize human habitats extremely well because it can use our homes as overwintering sites, so it can survive cold winters. It's invasive because it's not from this area and it spreads very rapidly when it gets into new habitats.
West Nile virus is generally mild, but can cause severe neurological problems. The virus can also affect pets and horses.
But I do think that there's a growing realization that with climate change and with the number of invasive mosquitoes in Canada rising, that this is going to be a problem that isn't going away and we need to start addressing it.
One more reason to avoid mosquitoes, and when you can't, use bug spray. Terry Reith, CBC News, Edmonton.
Well, a bit of a better day to hit the links in Regina now that all that smoke has cleared. With the wind, though, your shot may not have ended up where you intended. And while we did see some sun in Regina, it has been stormy in other parts of our province. Meteorologist John Sauter will have all our weather details when we come back. Western parts of Canada are still dealing with hundreds of active wildfires, but this year's extreme weather is not unique to this country. Climate experts see what's happening as part of a worsening trend, a global crisis that needs more attention and concrete action. Inayat Singh reports.
The planet looks angry this summer. The world experienced the hottest week ever recorded, and places like the southern US, parts of Europe and China are sweltering. Add to that devastating flooding in Asia and wildfires in North America, including here in Canada. The ongoing climate crisis is bringing misery everywhere. This resident of Delhi, India's capital, says the swelling Yamuna River has damaged her crops and destroyed her belongings. All scientific evidence points to a warming planet directly linked to human activities. Carbon emissions have already pushed average global temperatures 1.2 degrees above pre-industrial levels, a seemingly small number that belies major suffering affecting vulnerable communities around the world.
So the further global warming goes up, the more you're going to start sampling more extreme weather. So things that used to be kind of rare events become relatively common.
And there's more to come. The El Niño weather pattern caused by periodic warming in parts of the Pacific Ocean has returned this year. It tends to disrupt weather across the world, but this time it's compounding the already dramatic impacts of climate change.
Seeing the human toll of that is really kind of distressing to see, even if it's kind of what we were expecting.
The world's two largest emitters, the US and China, are holding high-level climate talks this week. The suffering of millions across the globe is now adding fresh urgency as the planet bakes. Inayat Singh, CBC News, Toronto.
This weather update is brought to you by Crestview Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram, proud member of the Capital Automotive Group.
Well, clouds are starting to roll in after some sun in our province today, and things are getting a little bit unsettled. Meteorologist John Sauter has the latest on our weather. John?
Yeah, we do have some inclement weather out to the west through Alberta that is just starting to move into Saskatchewan. So a couple of advisories and weather alerts are in effect. And we do have this air quality advisory across the north, also parts of the southwest. But the southwest, late this afternoon, a severe thunderstorm watch was issued for most areas from about Swift Current up into the Kindersley area, off into Alberta. As this system really gets going, we've got some severe thunderstorm warnings in effect. Here's why. You look at satellite imagery and you can see the leading edge of that system moving into the southwest with showers around Swift Current today and up into the Saskatoon area. That'll happen tonight, but Swift Current down through Val Marie over into Assiniboia and then a little bit farther north up around Kindersley. But this action you see here on radar off in Alberta is the storm activity and severe storms, and that is just moving up to the Alberta-Saskatchewan border. So that's why storms are in the forecast, mostly for western regions as we head into the evening, and then in the overnight period, it'll start to get into areas like Regina. But some of these storms that you see here on the forecast model moving up into the Edmonton area will drop about 60 to 80 millimeters of rain just tonight. And this is middle of the night, just after midnight. Some storms through Regina, up through Saskatoon, and then areas farther to the north. And then into the morning as this low really starts to take shape. It's sitting right over the Alberta-Saskatchewan border in the morning hours. A bit of a break here in the south, but central and southern regions will continue to see scattered showers and thunderstorms as that system moves to the south and east. So tonight's forecast looks like this with lows that are pretty seasonal, but expect to hear some thunder and perhaps see some lightning even into the overnight period. Back to the west, Swift Current, Kindersley, Saskatoon, all looking at showers and storms tonight. Farther north, the only quiet area is the far north, but it is hazy. Periods of rain south of L'Orange, but in that region and down through Prince Albert, 5 to 10 millimeters on the way. And we'll see more rain through that central part of the province and some storms tomorrow, and then in the south as well. And temperatures will really be held back. Kindersley only at 16, Swift Current only 19 tomorrow. Regina getting to 23 with afternoon showers and storms, a little bit cloudier over into the Yorkton area. Now, if we get through these next couple of days, we're into a more sunny, warmer, and stable weather pattern. We're looking at temps of 29 and 31 on the weekend. Same is true for Saskatoon. Saskatoon starts to quiet down a little bit on Wednesday, but Ethan, you can see that temperatures are really climbing on into the weekend as well for Saskatoon. So not just Regina, but Saskatoon. Back to you.
A firefighter in the Northwest Territories died over the weekend. He was killed fighting a wildfire outside his hometown near the border with British Columbia. His death comes just days after another firefighter was killed in BC while she was hit by a falling tree while battling a wildfire there. CBC's Kate Kyle has more from Yellowknife.
Out of respect for the family and the community of Fort Liard, the firefighter has not been named. He had been battling a fire about 10 hectares in size near his community when he was injured. Officials confirmed on Sunday he had died.
Our thoughts are with his family, his friends, and his colleagues during this unimaginable tragedy. The whole territory is feeling it. And you can see that in the outpouring of grief and condolence that we've seen from the public when we release this news. It's a very difficult time to be a firefighter in the NWT.
The RCMP and the coroner's office in the Northwest Territories have been contacted. Condolences are pouring out on social media. Premier Carolyn Cochrane said this is a tragic loss for the entire territory. Many firefighters working in the territory are from the NWT. This death is having an impact on the firefighting community as a whole across the country. This death is the second firefighter to be killed on the front line of a wildfire this past week. Kate Kyle, CBC News, Yellowknife.
A pre-dawn attack has damaged a critical bridge linking Russia's mainland to occupied Crimea. It's a key supply route for the invading Russian forces in Ukraine. As Moscow deals with the latest challenge, it has initiated a disruption of its own, one that threatens food security in other parts of the world. Abby Kuathasan has the details.
A symbol of the Kremlin's claim on Crimea fractured. Online videos show significant damage to the Kerch Bridge, which links southern Russia to the occupied Crimean Peninsula. Russian President Vladimir Putin says there will be a response. Moscow uses this bridge to transport its troops, tanks, and supplies into Ukraine. Kyiv has not taken responsibility, only saying all details regarding the explosion will be announced after the victory. Russian officials blamed unmanned drones, then a few hours after the explosion, delivered a jolt of their own, unilaterally pulling out of a deal allowing the shipment of Ukrainian grain. Though the Kremlin says that decision is not connected to the bridge attack. A year ago, the UN and Turkey brokered the deal for safe passage through the Black Sea. The UN says the 33 million tons of food that came out of a war zone was a global lifeline.
Hundreds of millions of people face hunger, and consumers are confronting a global cost of living crisis.
About 3% of Ukrainian food has gone to lower income countries, including Somalia. The Kremlin says that's not enough, but the UN points out the grain deal helped stave off a global food shortage and significantly lowered prices for those nations.
Russia has chosen its moment fairly well. Prices are relatively low because of global supply. And I think the impact on global food price will be much less now than when it was when the invasion began.
He says Putin has found a way to harm Ukraine without creating a severe shortage for other countries.
He will say to the African leaders is, if there is a shortfall, come to me.
Moscow says it will only rejoin the deal if it's readmitted into an international payment system and its own grain and fertilizer exports are better protected. Meanwhile, the last Ukrainian grain ship reached Turkey for inspection. Abby Kuathasan, CBC News, London.
Well, I'm expecting some thunderstorms to move through tonight in the Regina area, also in Saskatoon, but we'll be at about 17 degrees at midnight tonight. Winds are at about 20 to 25. Some of the storms may pick up those winds a little bit, but the storm activity quiets down a little bit in the morning and picks up much later in the day in Regina. Morning temperature around 19, just partly cloudy, but batten down the hatches for the afternoon and evening in Regina. Now tonight we've got showers and thunderstorms. 17 at midnight in Saskatoon. Your morning temperature in Saskatoon still cloudy, 16 degrees, south winds around 20 to 30, and again showers and storms will be forming on into the afternoon. Ethan?
Okay, we'll keep an eye out for that. Thank you, John. Well, nearly 3,500 people took a 5-kilometer-long run through foam, mud, and other obstacles over the weekend. This is the annual 5K Foam Fest Family Fun Run, which took place Sunday in Regina. Lots of excited, albeit exhausted participants made it over the finish line. Organizers say about half the runners were there for the first time. Bright Abonsaremi was one of them. He says one part of the race really stood out for him.
I'd like to say the death drop, which is the steepest drop, because I screamed like a little girl and it was a lot of fun, lots of energy, but every single obstacle through it was very exciting. My wife has done this before and she said I must come this time, so I was excited that she invited me.
And he says he will be back next year for sure. Organizers say the event has raised more than $3.6 million over the past 9 years. Looks like fun. And that is it for us tonight. For news anytime, you can always head to our website or subscribe to our CBC Saskatchewan YouTube channel. John and I will be back with more local news and weather at 11. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great night.